Whoever you are, however perfunctory your proselytizing, however equanimous your environmental expostulation. Hello. I'm not sure if the weather outside is coming through on this recording. The wind sounds like foreshadowing. A tempest of omens. Anyway, before we slide back in, I should apologise for my last episode. If you're the sort of person who listens to podcasts about science, philosophy, and human nature, which some evidence suggests you might be, it's unlikely that news of climate change and our catastrophic impact on the planet has passed you by. I was sort of banking on this. If, on the other hand, the stark bleakness of our situation had yet to reach you, my bedside manner must have been appalling. I just assumed you knew. Either way, today I'm wondering what stage of the apocalyptic acceptance curve you're currently camped out on. Denial is fun, as is blaming everybody else. Some listeners may already be taking steps to minimize their personal environmental footprint. Others are approaching the issue with a shell-shocked 9-yard stare. Wherever you're at, we owe ourselves a quick recap. Previously, I hoped to convince you that the 6th great mass extinction of life was firmly underway, and how we can qualify such end-is-nighness. We also looked at the 5 worst enemies of biodiversity, and how humanity is responsible for all of them. The acronym HIPPO was used to remind us that habitat loss, invasive species, pollution, population of Homo sapiens, and over-harvesting the planet's resources are driving our planet's wildlife to the brink. Today, I want to look at how things got so royally botched, and what we can do about it. Again, I'm not expecting to break this news to anyone, but another angle can't hurt. At least this way, we'll all perish well informed. Starting with some science, climate change occurs when the composition of Earth's atmosphere is altered. More specifically, greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane become way more plentiful, trapping the sun's heat and warming the planet. Because humanity has been burning fossil fuels like there's no tomorrow, the world has been releasing millions and millions of years of buried carbon in the form of coal, oil, and gas in just a few centuries. We can investigate the composition of Earth's atmosphere over time by digging up and analysing ancient air bubbles that have been trapped in ice for thousands of years. Hundreds of thousands of years. Ice cores from Antarctica taken from kilometres down provide a record of atmospheric change. These ice cores reveal how the composition of gases in the air changes over the eons, and how unnaturally fast our current carbon dioxide levels are rising. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere hasn't been this high for the last 8 glacial cycles. That's 740,000 years. If inquisitive aliens were to observe modern civilization and wonder what singular virtue humanity values above all else, removing as much carbon from the ground and throwing it into the air as quickly as possible would strike them as the obvious answer. We are doing a resoundingly good job of this. Despite a monumental amount of data, and with a heightened awareness of the risks and consequences, we currently show no signs of reducing our greenhouse gas emissions in any significant way. None. But greenhouse gases don't just warm the planet. Earth's greatest, by which I mean worst, mass extinctions of the past tell us that airborne carbon will wreak havoc on the oceans. Our planet's oceans absorb about 1/3 of all the carbon that we're emitting. We saw last episode that when carbon dioxide is dissolved in water, it becomes acidic. In short, by polluting the air, we've completely changed the chemistry of the sea. The effects of this are not easy to predict, but every possible outcome is bad. For example, anything with a shell is going to be adversely affected. This means that shellfish, mollusks, urchins, starfish, coral reefs, and millions of microscopic organisms, which account for roughly 1/3 of the species in the sea, will not be able to build their bodies. By collecting carbon, building it into a shell, and then dying of old age or predation, shellfish, marine plankton, and other invertebrates take all that carbon to the grave, burying it under the sea. Testate amoeba, we salute you. But seawater acidification causes ocean-wide osteoporosis, eating away at the minerals used by oysters, clams, lobsters, shrimp, and others to build their shells and skeletons. Chalk it up. With fewer shells capturing and burying carbon, more of it stays in the atmosphere. Assuming business-as-usual emission scenarios, estimates indicate that our surface waters could be 150% more acidic by the end of this century, resulting in a pH that oceans haven't experienced for more than 20 million years. I said that the outcome of this would be bad, but perhaps it's time to drop the reserved understatements. Oceans are also particularly vulnerable to overexploitation. This is due to a heap of recent technological developments. Commercial fishing vessels now sport sonar, refrigeration, colossal nets, and onboard meat processing facilities. And artificial fisheries aren't much better. They're often constructed by removing the mangroves that grow along shorelines. This eliminates a critical safe haven for young and vulnerable reef fish, and the natural filtration system between land and sea. Keep in mind that we still have to catch wild fish en masse to feed farmed fish, so there's really nothing sustainable about it. Salmon farms are often constructed at the mouths of rivers that wild salmon are known to visit. This is convenient for the fisheries, but very inconvenient for the fish, if only because keeping salmon in such dense numbers serves to incubate and spread parasites and disease with systematic efficiency. And these diseases don't know to stay in the farms, they drift off on the currents, infecting wild fish as they swim past on their way to natural feeding grounds. For these reasons, buying farmed salmon does not guarantee that you're helping the environment or wild salmon populations. Even shrimp fishing is horrendously problematic. 99% of all shrimp are caught by dragging fine nets the size of football fields across the bottom of the sea, indiscriminately extracting everything larger than a shrimp from the water. This is why shrimp fisheries catch more sea turtles than any other commercial fishery. What's worse, up to half of every catch gets thrown back, dead and wasted. Even with state-of-the-art bycatch reduction devices, non-target species are only reduced by about 30%. You have to wonder, why are we still doing this? What are we playing at? And when did it all go so wrong? Without a doubt, modern technological developments have allowed humans to take advantage of animals and plants more effectively over successive generations. But let's take it back about 170,000 years, to our species' earliest origins. In all this time, we've been building hunting tools, developing foraging strategies, and using fire to re-sculpt the landscape. This last item in particular would have kicked up a fair bit of carbon, but human numbers were generally so low in the ancient past that the planet barely noticed. Individual species did, particularly the ancient megafauna, whose extinctions trace the migration of humans across the planet precisely. But the climate was relatively safe from us, for now. Without realizing it, at least at first, our cumulative actions began to engineer new environments, ones where agriculture could eventually emerge. Only in the last 12,000 years have people taken to planting crops, raising livestock, and reworking the landscape on larger and larger scales. The practice has been accelerating ever since. This is not because farming communities were any happier than traditional societies, probably quite the opposite. But agriculture supports far larger populations of people who can unite to chase away those still living in the nature. And by chase away, I mean kill. Because humans. More land cleared for planting released more carbon dioxide, and a ballooning population worked wonders for technological leaps. This, sadly, tragically, opens great gulfs of inequality between different groups of people. Anyone with the power to stockpile surplus food, land, or wealth could tip the inequality in his family's favour over generations. In some cases, this could happen in a single lifetime. As whole forests began to fall, people didn't just pass on valuable practical knowledge and food surpluses. We started to inherit enduring ecological collateral from our ancestors. Unsurprisingly, conflicts over accumulated land and wealth drove people to claim new territories. Improved farming methods continued to produce larger harvests, but on the whole, human living conditions stayed about the same, which wasn't terrific. Most people belonged to a horrendously afflicted peasant class. They were undernourished, cold, fearful, and sickly, at least compared to the hunter-gatherers that we once were. By this point, technologies had evolved from horses to coal fires to metallurgy to ploughs and axes, but these advances couldn't free us from the feedback loop of environmental exploitation. People were still dying, often miserably, before their 40th birthday. We could opt for short-term improvements, but these invariably caused long-term environmental damage. For example, when the soil on your land has become so impoverished and unproductive that you face starvation, you can't blame people for upping sticks in search of more forest to clear. Even so, after a lifetime of grueling physical work, the average person's most valuable possession might have been a cow, or a goat, or a particularly sturdy cart. Over time and innumerable dismal lives, agricultural yields began to grow, pun acknowledged. This is thanks to modern farming techniques like crop rotation, selective breeding, and land consolidation. Ipso facto, the world's human population shot up again. Wildlands were swept away by gigantic farms, cities, and suburbs. Wealth and manpower fueled the fires of industry and trade. It's easy to see how our industrial revolution may have sparked the beginning of the end, for our species and many others. Industrialization made the human world richer, overall, by supercharging every disastrous practice we had. Industrialization did something to our minds as well. Technological progress inflated social expectations. All of a sudden, people didn't have to live where their food was grown. Plants and animals could migrate towards consumers, travelling thousands of kilometres on steam-powered trains. Goods and services that were preposterously luxurious in the past quickly became affordable. And in a very short stretch of time, anything that used to be desirable was now a basic necessity of life. Mechanized fabric looms allowed high street fashion to become a thing for the first time. Consumerism spread like cholera. By the 1800s, the pessimistic view that next year would be as miserable as the last had given way to a belief that humanity was progressing towards ever greater things. What a glorious cultural attitude! Before the agricultural revolution, while we were all still hunting and gathering, you could expect 1 square kilometre of land to sustain about 10 people. Today, the same area can feed thousands. By the 1930s, ordinary workers lived in bungalows, read newspapers, listened to the radio, and spent their leisure time shopping. But somewhere along the line, over 1/3 of Earth's productivity got confiscated for exclusive human use. According to Our World in Data, right now, almost half of Earth's ice-free land is used for farming, with 80% of that dedicated to animals. Despite this skew in land use, only 38% of human calorific needs are met by animal products, the rest from plants. Yet only 12% of the vegetable crops that we grow end up as human food. Due to the metabolic waste and inefficiency inherent in using animals to convert plants into meat, our livestock consume 3 times more of the crops we grow than people do. Grass-feeding your animals is framed as an ecological, sustainable alternative to factory farm feedlots, yet it drives more than half of tropical deforestation, and the numbers I just mentioned explain why. Whenever we increase human well-being, the environment seems to suffer in every conceivable way. Homo sapiens continues to steal from its own future to construct climate-controlled shopping malls that satisfy whimsically self-imposed desires. Neither our planet nor our psychology deserve this humiliating fate. Those same ice cores that map atmospheric changes over time also tell us something about the quality of the air that we're breathing. They document how mining operations have been contaminating the atmosphere since the Bronze Age. That's for about 3,000 years. You see, carbon doesn't wash out as easily as other pollutants. The lead from gasoline fumes has mostly disappeared from the atmosphere since it was banned, but carbon dioxide lingers for centuries. Methane is another potent greenhouse gas, one with a global warming potential 84 times greater than carbon dioxide over a 20-year period. Since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, atmospheric methane has more than doubled. This is almost entirely due to human activity, primarily the farming of ruminant livestock like sheep and cattle. Thankfully, methane breaks down in a relatively short time. Regrettably, methane breaks down into water vapour and carbon dioxide, both of which contribute to the atmospheric greenhouse effect. In the past, liberating carbon from the ground and pumping it into the air was the only way to get enough energy to survive. In the past, eating and selling animals may have been the only way to sustain your family. We were ignorant of the problems this would cause future generations. Now that we're beginning to see the bigger picture, we have dramatically cut down on all these harmful practices. Haven't we? No, we haven't. We're not even slowing down. Today, in 2024, every American child has the same carbon impact as 150 transatlantic flights per year. It would take more than 150 meat-eaters going vegan to offset each new human baby. Thanks to Ali Ward of the Ologies podcast for that insight. If we carry on multiplying and cutting down trees to make charcoal and hauling it across the ocean on steamy cargo ships powered by fossil fuels, we'll raise global temperatures far beyond anything tomorrow's world can handle. It'll take more than a nifty technological fix to put this right. We need to correct all of our harmful daily practices immediately, if not sooner. This includes mending some insidious pan-cultural myths, like dairy being essential for healthy bones and teeth, and that heat waves and wildfires have nothing to do with climate change, and that China is mostly responsible for everything. No one should have to stand on a soapbox to convince us that, for the sake of the planet, we must mend our maddeningly consumerist mindset. We know it's toxic. Initiatives to clean up urban beaches hardly matter as long as we're dumping a ton of plastic into the ocean every 4 seconds. It makes much more sense to refuse products that generate waste and stop plastic from entering the oceans rather than rely on inventing new ways of cleaning it up. Boycotting single-use plastics and changing what we eat are obvious places to start if we're serious about reducing our impact on this planet. But then there's establishing more protected areas, helping large corporations to manage their waste, demanding more responsible attitudes from supermarkets, voting for politicians with an environmental conscience, educating the public on how farming practices on land relate to the sea and rivers. We can start using mineral sunscreens, stop contributing to fast fashion, ban drinking straws and the sale of nationally invasive plants completely, teach local communities the true value of biological diversity, resist manicuring the life out of our gardens and green spaces, and buy as much of our clothing and possessions second-hand as possible. There are so many things that we can do or start to do right now, today. Practically everything that you do can and should be critically assessed. If an aspect of your everyday life can't be justified on environmental or moral grounds, consider stopping, or finding an alternative as soon as possible. If with good conscience you honestly can't do any better, then carry on. Ultimately, we only answer to ourselves. For what it's worth, just like any other mass extinction to date, when human beings die out, life on Earth will persist. In the meantime, if we spoil the oceans and impoverish the land, we terminate ourselves. Helping as many ecosystems to survive our influence as possible is a noble undertaking. But if you need a self-centered reason to look after the environment, it is the survival of our species that's ultimately at stake. What will the last surviving Homo sapiens wish that we'd done differently? Well done, team. We got through it. The topic, not the anthropogenic apocalypse. That's only just begun. Where should we go next? How about artificial intelligence? The cause of, and possibly answer to, yet another existential threat to humanity. Let's have at it!